Calling this meeting to order. Peter, do you want to weigh in? Yes.
Yes.
Dee?
Yes.
Parashar?
Yes.
Andrea? Chris?
Yes.
Dean?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
Thank you. John?
Yes.
Great. Okay, I'm calling this meeting to order October 8th, the Finance Committee. We are being broadcast as well. And the first order of business is to review the minutes. And I think we have two sets of minutes available to us. The first is July 23rd. Do I have any changes on the July 23rd minutes?
Yes.
Dee, go ahead.
On page 2, these are really important. On page 2, it is on page 2 of the minutes. It
Yeah.
is to the fourth full paragraph down,
Yep.
or the third one from the bottom. And on the third to the last line, it says Mr. Ortner. Would you please change that to Ms. Ortner? Did you find that one, Anita?
I did, yes.
Okay, and then on page 3, in the second full paragraph, fourth line down, in the middle of the line, it says Ms. Banfield. Would you correct that to Mr.?
Good catch.
That I was going to come in with that one, Dee, but you
Oh, you
did
were.
punch. It's fine.
Well, I saved you on that one. Otherwise, they were excellent as usual. Thank you, Anita.
Any other changes to the July 23rd minutes? Do I have a motion to approve?
1 second on that, because the one that Dee found that said Ms. Banfield may not be the one that I found. The one I found was on page 2, the second full paragraph, about halfway down. It says Ms. Banfield.
On page 2 of the minutes?
I believe so. I don't have them right here. Hold on.
I don't see that. I don't see that.
Okay, you may be referring to the same one. Then let's just skip on from that. I had noted it as page 2, the second full paragraph, but that's fine. Maybe it's page 3. Maybe it's the one that Dee was pointing to.
Okay,
So I'll move approval as amended, Madam Chair.
thank you. Do I have a second?
Second?
Second, good. I'll go around again. Myself, yes. Peter?
Yes.
Dee?
Yes.
Parashar?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Dean?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Lois?
Abstain because I wasn't at the meeting.
Well, you know, technically it's crazy, but technically you can approve them, but you can abstain as well.
Then yes.
Okay. Brian?
Yes.
Wade?
Yes.
Great. Okay, good. It's unanimous. How about the minutes of the September 13th meeting, which was when we got together at town meeting in response to mostly 2 amendments. Any changes?
None for me.
Great. Motion to approve.
So moved.
So moved?
Second?
Second.
Second.
Great. Okay, I'll go around again. Me, Mary Hartman, yes. Peter?
Yes.
Dee?
Yes.
Parashar?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Dean?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
Kathy? John?
Yes.
Lois?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute.
That's okay. Wade?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, the second thing on our agenda is, as you know, Peter Fischelis has made a decision to resign. Peter's very busy, and he asked us just address the board or the committee for a few minutes. So Peter, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, I'll be really quick. I just wanted to say that it's been a pleasure serving with all of you. And I made a decision when I was asked to renew the the term with Carmen, I said, if you found somebody who has time and is very interested, I'd be more than happy to relinquish my seat. And she had asked me to stay on because we needed bodies. So then Mary emailed me and said that there were some others that were interested. So I felt like the board would be better served given my crazy schedule right now. And I would be better served. And certainly if there's other people who are more inclined, I wanted to give them the opportunity. So I've made the decision to leave the board, knowing that it's in great hands. You guys are a great group. Well, in my experience of being on the school committee and years in the finance committee, this is one of the finest groups of finance committee members that I've seen, just really diligent and thorough and thoughtful. So I will bid you adieu and wish you the best of luck. I know that the town is well served by all your efforts, and carry on the great work that you're all doing.
Great. Thank you, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Peter.
Peter.
Yay,
We always
You're not gonna
appreciate
stay-
it.
You're not
Thank
going to
you.
stay for one last meeting?
yay.
You're gonna stay to the end of the meeting, or do you have to go?
Well, I don't think you need me at this point, right?
You're here.
I'm here. I'm happy to stay on and serve
Okay.
one last meeting. So go ahead.
We were going to end this at 10 and then party until 11. So
And I'm
if you
in.
really want to stay on.
Isn't
Okay.
there something, Mary, we can quickly appoint Peter to going forward? Or
Anyway, Peter, thank you for that. And, I think we always appreciated what you had to say. You were a man of few words, but when you spoke, we listened. You had some great things to say about the school committee, and we appreciate that.
Yeah, just one last point on that one. Always remember, the cost is in the contracts.
Yep.
Don't ever forget that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, while we're on this topic, I would like to briefly give Greg an opportunity to remind us of something that he apparently told us already and I forgot. So Greg Greg has, his wife is the co-chair, I believe, of the middle school building committee. And Greg, you've looked into the possibility of a conflict of interest. So why don't you remind us again of the work you've done and the result of that?
Yeah, so just to give a quick summary, my wife is the co-chair of the Concord Building Committee. Back when I joined FinCom, I think like 2 weeks before I was appointed, she spoke before FinCom about she wasn't on the building committee at that point. It was about the money seeking for the feasibility study. At that point, I would talk to Carmen about it. And I spoke with the attorney of the day as well to see if there was any conflict of interest there. There was not. So I filed the paperwork with Carmen and Dean. I believe you were forwarded both of these documents that I'm going to refer to.
Yep.
Then my wife became the board after I was on FinCom. Again, went back to Carmen. Again, spoke to the attorney of the day at in Massachusetts, and determined that there is no conflict of interest. The big driver behind that was because FinCom is not awarding contracts to anybody within, FinCom is not awarding contracts to anybody. So myself or my family could not personally benefit financially from any of the decisions that we were making. So again, I went through a second round, filed another paperwork. I think it's 286A form or whatever the form is with the town clerk and again with Dean. I believe I did bring it up, but I think in all of the work that we do, it always slips our minds. So that's why whenever I talk about the middle school, I do bring up that my wife is the co-chair of it. Mary and I spoke this week. I offered to constantly abstain myself from any votes or recuse myself from anything of the Concord Building Committee. We had a discussion and didn't think it was appropriate at that point, but if I ever do find in the upcoming that there is a conflict of interest, I am going to abstain from any vote. So I think that's a summary of where we are now, Mary, if that's correct.
That's great. Thank you, Greg. Thank you. Okay. Next on our agenda is, we were lucky to have Elise here. Elise, where are you? There you are. Elise, you're with us. Great.
Yeah,
Great. Great. Elise is going to talk to us about the long-range capital planning. And Parashar, I thought can you take a few minutes to just ground us on where we are with this?
Sure, but I think Elise, are you going to present some slides? I think Elise was planning to, right?
Yes, she is. She had.
Yeah, so just very quickly, and Elise will get into more detail, but the work of the task force sort of was paused in midstream because of the pandemic. Dee was on representing our liaison from the finance committee earlier in the year. I've sort of picked up, and as Elise will go into some detail, she'll share a little bit about what the charge of the task force was. I think there have been some decisions made around what is a very large capital project, and then discuss, I think, a couple of major issues that are still outstanding. Some of the criteria that might be used to assess very large projects, whether or not there should be a permanent or standing committee for capital planning committee, for example, and a couple others. So rather than me go on, let me just turn it over to Elise. I know she and the rest of the task force wanted to get input from the FinCom, and I think timing wise, it's good because we're scheduled to hold a public hearing in early December. So having your viewpoints in, I think would be good so we can reflect it in whatever draft presentation we end up sharing for public input. So Elise, thank you for taking time to come today. And let me ask you to go ahead and start sharing the screen.
thank you very much. Well, I appreciate the invitation, and as Parashar indicated, the task force is very interested in the FinCom's perspective on this, and any advice, suggestions that you would have for us would be welcome and coming at just the right time. So let's see, I have a PowerPoint. That's, yeah, I don't know if I can get to a. Can you see this?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Now the question is how can, all right. So I wanted to just give you some background. These are the task force members, and you will see that we have two former members. Dee Ortner was liaison to the Finance Committee in 2019 and early 2020, and Todd Benjamin was a citizen at large member and the chair in that same time frame. So with their departures from this committee, this is the new roster, and I was elected chair at our last meeting. The Select Board issued a charge establishing the Capital Planning Task Force in 2019 in September. We were charged to develop a process for townwide capital planning to be used annually. So the idea here was that the current capital plan of 5 years should be anticipated to be extended to be a 10-year horizon. In part, this came as a recommendation in the comprehensive long-range plan. And the original time frame for our work was a 6-month time frame to be completed in March of 2020. So we met 8 times beginning in November. Our last meeting was March 2nd, and then we paused from March to September because of the pandemic. And so now the Select Board has adjusted the time frame, expecting our recommendations by the end of June. The essential purpose in the charge, as the charge describes, is to identify a process that will anticipate and with a strategy for funding very large projects that may require debt exclusion. And with an interest in having a predictable criteria for evaluating projects, timing and prioritizing them, being certain that they meet the community's criteria, especially with regard to climate impacts, as well as balancing competing priorities. So the notion here would be that if we're going to make a very large expenditure as a community, we'd like it to, that expenditure to work across different systems, many systems, so that we would achieve benefit in many arenas. And obviously to balance affordability. So to date, we have reviewed the existing capital planning process and the cadence of the annual projects requests. After many discussions, defined a very large project, and to have that definition include phase projects. We sought input from all of the boards and committees through the chair breakfast forum. We developed a draft evaluation criteria list, and we have been planning a public forum to add input from citizens to our process. Going backwards. So this is our definition of a very large project. Understand this might be sometimes called a tier 3 project. It would be a project exceeding a cost of $5 million, or a project that has 2 or more phases totaling $5 million or more. If $5 million were borrowed for the median household, assuming a 20-year repayment, it would amount to $6,250 annually in taxes. We thought about phase projects, and the reason to do phase projects, as I'm sure you all know, is that the work can be completed in phases. It may allow an accelerated timeline, especially if there is a condition of system or equipment failure. It may allow for additional due diligence to start a project in one fiscal year, continue it to another subsequent year. And it also might give an opportunity to act on might give the ability to act on a unique opportunity that had not been anticipated in capital outlay planning. A phase project might be one that where there was insufficient annual resources to complete the project in a single phase, but it was still identified as an important to the community. And of course, the cost of a phase project could be more than an annual budget, even though it might not be a very large project. But in any event, we included this phase definition with our definition of a very large project. This is the working draft project evaluation criteria. I'm not going to read it because I think you can read it faster than I can speak it. But it gives you a flavor of the criteria that the task force would anticipate would be applied to any capital outlay. Our intention is to have Kate Hanley, the Sustainability Director of Concord, review this to be certain that it is, that our language, et cetera, and is aligned with the Concord Climate Action Plan. We would like to hear from you whether you think that there should be other criteria listed here, or some of these maybe are not important. So these are our working draft recommendations. A process for prioritizing and sequencing projects. This is a work in progress, so I don't have a process outline to share with you tonight, but the next time we meet, I will. We would want to adopt this project evaluation criteria that I just showed you. And importantly, would anticipate that the town and school tier 3 projects would be integrated, and that they would be in an effort to add transparency to the capital planning process, that Tier 3 projects would be presented at a joint select board school committee meeting, so that it would, to try to give this the most airtime possible. And then the process should have a strategy for identifying projects beyond the current 5-year timeline. So the decisions that we've not yet made that we expect to make after more deliberation would be to evaluate the pros and cons of establishing a permanent capital planning committee. We heard from other towns, some of our neighboring towns, who do have standing capital planning committees. And so there are pros and cons, so we plan to evaluate that and then to make a draft recommendation before our public forum. As I said, we'll have Kate Hanley review the project evaluation criteria. There's been a fair amount of discussion of fiscal sustainability, what that really means, and we did agree that you know, that dollars should be characterized in 2020 dollars, and that may be a little too broad brush or not precise enough, but I think it is important to establish sort of a benchmark for the dollars so that we are able to anticipate escalation or you know, change in project value over time. And then the overall process, we intend to have a description of how the prioritization and sequencing of Tier 3 projects might be adjusted for the opportunistic project that would come along. So our next steps, this is our timeline. This is the absolute longest timeline that we will have, because we may be able to speed this up a bit. In October, we're taking the opportunity to be certain that everyone on the committee is up to speed with the work that's been done before our pause. We'll be discussing the benefits of a standing capital planning committee. We'll be preparing our draft recommendations in November in advance of a public forum that's been scheduled just today for December 2nd. And that will be our opportunity to collect citizen input. Then in January, we'll be able to adjust the recommendations, proceed with our draft recommendations, and finalize them to present to the select board no later than the end of June. So tonight, I'd love to hear from you, what you think about our definition of a very large project, other criteria that you might suggest we add, any other suggestions, and what you think is most important to citizens in one of the sort of intended efforts of this capital planning task force is to make the capital planning process more transparent to citizens. And then what can we do to support the Finance Committee? So thank you.
Thank you, Elise. I will start with your definition of a very large project. I assume meant that it's over 5 million, even if it's phased over multiple years. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Great.
Yes.
Okay, I'm okay with that. I'm just wondering why sometimes we have different definitions of what is under the purview of the capital planning task force. Sometimes it's very large projects, sometimes it's Tier 3, sometimes it's projects that may require a debt exclusion. And I think it might simplify things if we just made it very large projects.
Okay.
I don't know, what do other people, because I don't think very many people know what Tier 3 means. And I'm also sure that the fact that whether it's funded with a debt exclusion, which is basically an override, or through within the levy limit, I don't think people really always understand that either. So that would be my first comment, and then I'll open it up to other people.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Hi, Elise. This is Chris Reynolds.
Hi.
Hi. So my interest in this is perhaps a subset of what your group is going after. And it arose for me in connection with the middle school project. So there, there's a need was identified by the schools that obviously they needed a new middle school. But when you sort of stood back and looked at the fact that we had just built a new high school, and we took a look at what that would mean to the debt load and the taxes in the town, that's where it struck me, there really isn't a capital plan here. Sort of needs come up by individual budget entities, could be the town, could be each of the school districts. And then that need comes forward to the town as some sort of, an item that's requested for funding, as opposed to being part of a plan. And these buildings, so when I think about this problem, I think that's what I'm trying to solve, is that I think as part of prudent financial planning for the town for significant buildings, and I think much larger than 5 million. The school buildings are 100 million, 80 million. The town buildings that are on the docket are also adds up to over, I think, $130 million. So there are large buckets of spending. And given that buildings have lives, it would be great if we could have a plan that sort of said, here are the, whatever it is, 20 major buildings in town. This is their age. This is the amount of depreciation or maintenance, if you will, that's required for those buildings in order to keep them in good shape. And this is how long we think they're going to live, or they'll be workable. And then we're going to have to start thinking about funding replacements in 20 years, 30 years, whatever the right time frame is. So that overlay is really what I was looking for, because of the impact of having ad hoc decisions coming from all well-meaning, well-intended, necessary decisions, but having them not be managed in a coordinated way struck me as not great from a financial planning perspective. So that was my impetus towards pushing for where is the plan. So I know you guys are after a process. I'm actually after a plan, but that's the problem I was off to go see if we could solve, Elise, if that's helpful.
So thank you. That's helpful. There are a number of municipal buildings, and I'm sorry I don't have the exact quantity for you tonight, but I'm going to learn that fact so that I will always be able to say the town owns and operates, 123 buildings or whatever it is. And I do think that the process that you're hoping for, describing, would be exactly that. How would we think about renewing all of these municipal facilities? Over what is the time frame for that, and what is the overall cost? So thank you. That's
great. I assume you're familiar with that. There was a report, and I think it was in 2003, this facilities planning task force.
There was a 2002, 2003 facility planning.
That was, in my opinion, exactly what I'm looking for. It was an excellent analysis. Their recommendations are similar to the ones I would give you today. And for whatever reason, and I think this is an important issue for your committee, and I believe it was not implemented. So there were either governance, political, other reasons why, and I can guess what they are, having lived in organizations before, that for some reason we couldn't get it done. So people thought it was a good idea, but it didn't get done. And so I would ask that your committee really look at what are the obstacles to putting this in place, and what sort of buy-in is required from which players. And I think you have them all on your committee or representatives thereof to make this work, because we did all this work. We had the right idea, but we couldn't get it done.
I think that's a good argument for the standing committee. So instead of a report, even a really well done report that just becomes a report that's remains stagnant, if we had a standing committee, we would have a committee to review and update that report. It would be a map that people would be following instead of a map that was just put aside. That would be my thinking.
Okay, thank you.
If does anyone else have anything that they'd like to add? Yeah, Phil.
Elise, first of all, I think this is a great idea. I'm glad you're doing this and your task force is doing this. But I just wanted you to know, to let you know, a couple of years ago, we advocated the establishment of a standing permanent building committee. And we went pretty far with it with the select board. I remember appearing before the select board and explaining it. I thought they were on the verge of adopting or having one. But anyways, the materials we created for that sound a lot like the things that you're looking at. We looked at other towns, and it was basically the same idea. Large capital projects, but those were building projects. And the idea being that you have a standing committee so that when the buildings come up, you don't have to have an ad hoc committee where everybody gets to learn for the first time, you know, what an architectural study is and so on. The members already know. So you may want to dig up those materials for the permanent building committee. If you can't find them, I think it was about 3 years ago when Chris Whalen was town manager and Tom McKean was the chair of the select board. But if you can't find them, I can probably dig them up.
Okay, well, let's agree to look for them, and if I find them, I'll let you know, and if you find them, please send them to me.
Any other comments from the committee? Dean?
So Elise, thanks for all the work that's been done so far. It looks like you're heading in absolutely the right direction. We have been advocating for a capital planning committee. You're evaluating a process. Chris has already said, look, this is what we're advocating for. So I think that our position from the finance committee, I'm going to mention this is my position, but I think it has been stated and we have taken votes in the past that we would like to see this turn into a permanent committee. We can bat it around as a committee, but I think that we've come to those conclusions previously as a committee that we would, I believe I actually was charged with writing a letter as chair to the select board saying, please establish a capital planning committee. So it is our hope that what Chris was already alluding to, a committee that takes this on and formalizes it would be our hope. So that's point number one. Point number two is the $5 million and possibly multi-phased approach seems like it feels like a low bar when we're talking about that in comparison to building new buildings that cost, you know, tens of millions of dollars. So the disconnect there is like, where is that threshold? Can you just give us a little insight as to the process you went through to arrive at that number? Because we could spend, you know, close to that getting White Pond in, you know, up to where it needs to be, including a bathroom and a lot of other infrastructure that needs to go on over there. So it is, you know, that is at the level of project that we want to take on as part of this, we'll call it large scale capital plan. It's a question. So can you just give us some insight as to how that 5 million, how you arrived at that number?
So we discussed this at great length, and you know, I think, and I'll just speak for myself now, not for my task force. I think in part the $5 million is threshold is conflated with a funding source. So it would be, you know, likely be a debt exclusion project to support a $5 million project or something larger. So I think, you know, it may not be precise enough in that regard. And the, you know, one of the questions is, should we be describing funding sources with the value of any project? You know, whether it's you know, a project that's funded from the annual budget, you know, pay as you go, whether it is you know, funded within the levy limit, whether it is a debt exclusion. You know, I don't know whether that adds clarity or confuses people.
Elise, I just would like you to know that the Finance Committee, our last meeting, we decided to set up a subcommittee to look at debt. And as you just mentioned, debt goes hand in hand with all of these capital projects. This subcommittee is brand new. We just started. We haven't really gotten our goals together. But what we did learn when we met is that we have to get grounded on what we know. So all these terms that were, like within the levy limit or pay as you go or excluded debt or capital, all these things, we needed to get grounded on what that means and what are the current policies. So that is something that the work that we're going to do. And then after that, we will go to the select board or the town manager or whatever and find out what is the next step and how could we integrate that into the long range plan to smooth out the debt. So where I'm going with this is I'm hoping that at some point, the long range planning committee helps us to smooth out the debt, because one of the ways we ensure affordability is to make sure that we don't have huge bumps like we're going to experience with the middle school. So maybe one of the, I'm thinking way ahead now, but if we had a subcommittee that looked at debt, we could in fact start to smooth out debt, and that would be part of the capital planning process to prioritize and smooth some of these expenditures. But so I wanted you to be aware that, this is in the works. I don't know how far it's going to go, but I think if it does get some legs, it would be it would integrate well with the long range capital planning as far as, okay, what are the projects we need because of community needs, but how do we time these so that the funding is affordable?
So thank you. We can collaborate with
yes,
with that subcommittee. Thanks.
Right. Yeah, we'll see how far it goes, but it's a possibility. Dee?
Yeah, Elise, first, thank you for taking on the chairmanship of this committee.
My husband says a willing victim of self-abuse.
There you go. There you go. A couple of points that I'd like to make, which would be, you've done a very good job in organizing and synthesizing the work that went on before. And also with the new committee that you have, the new task force you have in establishing the criteria. I think your evaluation criteria, using that for every project, is significant and will help people in understanding the transparency aspect. Probably the best one that I heard tonight is the integration of town and school tier 3 projects. That I think will go very far, not only in giving community members a better understanding, but also in our town meeting warrant articles and the participation of our citizens at that point. I also like the notion of developing a process for what goes on beyond the 5 years, because many of these projects, you have to look out over a long period of time. And then the last item I thought of just recently is there a way of looking at new construction as well as maintenance? As these buildings, as they age, sometimes the maintenance costs, they're going to exceed. Put in a new boiler, you know what that costs. So do you treat everything the same? Do you have maybe 2 groups of projects? I don't know. It's just something that I want to throw out there. And then finally, the implementation is critical, as you pointed out, and you need the obstacles, you have to look at those, and also the buy-in. But I think early on in your presentation, you used the word predictable. And that's really what we're looking for. What kind of a plan will we have that anyone can look at and they'll say predictable? Okay, here are the chunks of time, here are the costs that are associated with those. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dee.
Okay. Any other comments? Wade?
Elise, I want to reiterate what others have said. Thank you so much for all the work the committee's done. A couple things strike me, and I'm new to finance. This is my 2nd year on the committee. But one thing I've picked up on is that some projects seem to have scope creep, multi-phase projects. I'm thinking about the Giroux project has come up time and again in discussions, and it's it's probably under the $5 million, but it seems that things keep on getting added to the project as time goes on that weren't necessarily presented to the town, you know, in a kind of a comprehensive way. I guess the question is, if it's a standing committee, what's going to be done to kind of track capital projects over time to make sure that we don't get scope creep, or if there are changes to essentially that, you know, that those big ticket items, that we're able to track that and understand that. Because as projects go on and committee members change, we tend to lose a lot of that knowledge. And if we have a standing committee, maybe there's an opportunity to kind of track that institutional knowledge over time, because things do tend to change over time. So that's just a question of mine.
So that's helpful. And of course, I have a point of view about scope creep. You know what the four most expensive words are in any construction project? While we are at it, right? So I think that, you know, in my day job, I was an architect. So projects inevitably have scope creep for any number of reasons, because the owner decides they need different things, because the contractor convinces the owner that it can't be done the way it was initially anticipated, you know, or because the architect has a new idea. So there are lots of, you know, there are lots of vectors that change, that may work to change the scope of a project. And if you've been paying attention to any of the TIP projects, you know, that are funded by the state, when these projects are anticipated, such as the rotary reconstruction at the prison, which was anticipated a project about 20 years ago, it was like a $5 or $10 million project. Well, today it would be, you know, 100 times that probably, you know, be a very, very big project. So the longer the time goes on before a project, from the time a project is anticipated to when it's actually realized, the escalation is shows a dramatic increase. So I think that in the longer our timeline is on capital planning, the more attention we'll have to give to scope creep, budget creep, or, you know, any of those aspects, because that is the thing that irritates citizens the most, in my view, is a project is sold at town meeting, approved at town meeting, and next year, guess what? It's back, and oh, it needs a little more money. Oh, and then the next year it's back, and nobody ever focused on the fact that this might be the case. So it's viewed as not transparent, not clear, not honest, when in fact it may just be the way construction projects work. So I think the more clarity we can give on all of those elements, the better off we will be for informing citizens and for being realistic in our capital planning.
Parashar?
Yeah, I think one thing, you know, I quickly learned through the first couple of meetings with the task force is, you know, the challenge of not reinventing the wheel. So I think, you know, as Elise alluded to, both the schools and the town already do capital planning at a pretty good level for those pay-as-you-go type projects. And the projects above 5 million, at least in my short history in town, there have been a couple that have had that scope creep, right? And have become a bit controversial at town meeting. But I don't necessarily, I haven't heard any evidence or seen anything that says, hey, in the last 5 to 10 years, we haven't been good at planning large projects. So I do want, you know, at least to provide a little bit of that context, that I think the task force wants to make sure that we're not reinventing the wheel while we're developing a process that may be more rigorous and provide some of the transparency and clarity that Elise talked about earlier.
Thank you, Parashar. That's very important, I think, that the capital planning project that is in place, that the Finance Committee knows and loves and, you know, visits every year, is a reasonably effective process. You know, it's actually working pretty well.
Chris?
Elise, just wondered if you guys kind of reverse engineered the 5 million. Do you know how many projects would fall into that if this process was in place now?
I do not know the answer to that, no. But
I
that
would do that because I
that would
think
be
that
worth
might
thinking
that
about.
might make you push that number up a little higher.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other comments? Stephen?
I just going back to Chris's earlier comment. In last fall, we had a comprehensive facilities assessment done by TBA architects that was reported on, and I submitted a memo to the select board with our prioritization. So I think that, I don't, when you say a plan was done 2013, I think we spent some time talking about that at the committee level. Stuff changes, priorities change, needs change. So, I mean, I think we discovered that it wasn't really worth going back and revisiting that because most circumstances had moved forward. So I think the better reference point is the 2019 TBA architect study that's on the website, which lays out kind of the next snapshot of where our town buildings are, where the priorities, should be. So I just wanted to say that's not a gap. That gap is covered. We have that study, and I do think we've spent a lot of time talking at the Capital Planning Task Force about, is that the role? Is that the level of analysis we're looking at? And the answer is no. A boiler is not $5 million, and so I think it's more the larger scale projects. And are there $5 million? We know we didn't reverse engineer it. It just was a number that felt like, we reverse engineered insofar as what would really trigger a debt exclusion. Are there projects in the middle, below 5 million that could be phased? And they can, and there's nothing inherently wrong with phasing a project. And I do think that most times you report on the phases as you know them. I think I've talked about this here, especially with White and Giroux, where they kind of happened kind of quickly and there were needs that were immediate that needed to be addressed. So, I do think that the very large project thing, and we spent hours trying to figure out the right way to do that, but it really needs to be a higher level of kind of coordination by stakeholders who are, really proficient and knowledgeable about those specific projects. Because by the time, and I think Elise would attest to anybody who's involved in any kind of project, by the time you get to 5 million, there's a lot to it. There's a lot to it. There's been a lot of planning, a lot of discussion. So I think it is helpful to have some, additional conversation about it. So I just wanted to really let you know that there is a facilities study that is comprehensive for the town buildings.
Yeah, no, I liked the report that you guys produced. My point going back to 2002 was really about the process recommendations that they had, Stephen, not the, the building stuff. I think what you did on the town was great. If you guys like the 5 million, you like the 5 million. I sort of was, I'm telling you, you could probably do less and probably accomplish most of what we're worried about on the debt front.
Steve, just a comment on that facilities plan. I saw the presentation of a draft version of that at the select board. Is there a final that's now up? Is that a final that's been posted of that?
You know what? I think we didn't have a lot of comments on that draft, but to be honest with you, I don't know that we have the final, to be honest with you. TBA Architects is also the firm that's doing the townhouse first floor renovations. And I think we ended up focusing on that with them. And so we may not have that final signed, steel delivered, but I don't think I think the content and the analysis is pretty much, bankable. I don't know that there would be changes to recommendations or whatever, but that's a good question. I'll have to check.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Elise. I think I would just like to sum up, and the Finance Committee's main concern is the impact on the property tax holders. So I think my main concern would be the timing of the debt as it relates to capital projects. So that I just wanted to emphasize that. You told us that the hearing is going to be December 2nd, did you say?
December 2nd via
Great.
Zoom.
Great, good. Okay. Thank you very much. So we'll be there.
Great.
Okay, thank you, Elise.
Thank you for the opportunity to meet with you. I greatly appreciate it. And you know how to reach us, so don't be shy. If you have new ideas, let us know.
Okay,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Thanks, Liz.
Okay, that was informative. Okay, next item on our agenda is the guideline calendar. The select board met on Monday and they voted to adopt the calendar that the moderator Carmen Reese had proposed, which delayed town meeting from its normal April timeframe out until the middle of June. I think town meeting is now scheduled to be June 13th. So that means that the warrant will close instead of the warrant usually closes early January. Now the warrant will close at the end of March. So that gives us an opportunity to delay the guideline process so that we have better information when we're developing the operating budgets with the schools, and the schools will have, and town will have better information when they discuss with us what the operating budget will be. I'd like Chris to go over that calendar with you for a minute. Chris, can you do that with
Sure.
us?
I think everybody has the updated draft calendar. Carrie sent it around today, I think. So if you take a look at it, you'll see where the guidelines now start. So normally we would have been doing guidelines in October, November, producing something at the end of November. We've moved that to January and February. So we will be issuing guidelines about a month before the warrant closes. So we sort of backed up from when the warrant closes based on the new meeting date. So we have our first guidelines meeting on January 7th, and we have the schools coming in on that day. So if you recall, we have 2 sessions with the schools normally, I should say, we have 2 sessions with the town and 2 sessions with the schools. What we did this year that's different is we asked that the schools in their second round come separately. So one night for Concord Public Schools and one night for Concord Carlisle Regional High School. So you'll see that as one thing that's different from our process from last year. So January 21st, we have our initial meeting with the schools on a combined basis. Then on the 14th, we meet with the town and we combine them with Minuteman. So Minuteman we meet with once and they will come in on the same night as the town. Then on the 21st, so after we've seen all 3 bodies for the first round, we'll come up with preliminary guidelines. So this will be our preliminary view of what the increase or decrease or change to the to the budget percentage should be. And so that's our preliminary guidelines. Then we go through a second round. So the second round starts in February. On February 4th, we will have the town and the Concord Public Schools in to review their proposed budgets. And then on the following week, on the 11th, we would have the high school. And then on 25th, February 25th, we would recommend our final guidelines. And then the 26th, we would issue them. So the next day, that's not a meeting date, but that's the date we would actually officially issue them. Okay.
Great. One thing I want to point out is that there was a vote at annual town meeting in 1976 that required the Finance Committee to publish a guideline on November 30th. So Carmen asked our town council for an opinion about our ability to delay the guideline. And I want to remind you that last year we actually didn't publish a guideline on November 30th either. I think we were late by about a week. But according to Mina's opinion, he wrote that, yes, we're supposed to publish the guideline on November 30th, but I don't think he believes nobody would have a problem with that. And most people would understand that because of COVID-19 and because of our need to delay and our judgment that we should delay, that delaying the guideline is the prudent thing to do. I would publish something on the town's website, letting people know that, yes, we are going to delay publishing the guideline and the reasons why. So that would go on the town's website, and I'll have the verbiage ready for us next meeting so that you can review that with me. But if there's any discussion on this, I would actually entertain a motion to adopt this new guideline calendar. Any discussion? Lois?
I was going to move it if there isn't any discussion.
Well, you need to move it before the discussion, then we can have.
Go
a
ahead, move it.
Okay, so moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Any discussion?
So my question is, should we it really is ancillary to the motion that's on the table, but it's relevant. Should we as a finance committee be preparing a town meeting article asking that we have some kind of, buffer between when our guideline is due and then the warrant? So
Yes.
we just say we need to be 5 weeks before the warrant or something that's
Yeah.
relative to
We
the
do.
warrant.
Yes, and you're good, Dean, thank you. The verbiage that I'll be writing to put on the town website will announce that actually, that we intend to submit an article for the town meeting that will make the date of the publishing the guideline be more flexible and I think will relate more to the closing of the warrant as opposed to a specific calendar date. Okay, but yes.
Okay,
And
so
we'll
that would be part of your statement. That's
that will be
fine.
part of the statement that we will review at our next October 29th meeting.
Perfect.
Okay, but good. But yeah, I haven't forgotten about that, and I plan to do that, and I hope everybody agrees with that. So, no other discussion. I'll take a vote. Dee,
Yes.
myself, Mary Hartman, yes. Parshar,
Yes.
thank you. Lois,
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Andrea,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Wade,
Yes.
Greg,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Phil,
Yes.
Peter.
Yes.
Great, it's unanimous, thank you. Okay, next item on our agenda is remote participation. This came up from our discussion last meeting as far as moving the time of our meeting. I think I heard from a lot of people saying that would be very difficult for them to attend earlier unless we could enable remote participation. Dean raised his hand to go off and research this, which he's done. So Dean, tell us what you learned.
Okay, so what we have is a layered system right now. There's 2 layers going on at the state level, and then we have a local overlay at the Concord level. Okay, the state has published a set of regulations, and those regulations specifically state that remote participation is allowable only when you have some distress situation and with the approval of the chair in advance, as much advance notice as you can give, so to speak. And there's something I learned about remote participation, and that is that the minute that any one individual is participating remotely, even if in the old school way you were just on a conference phone, you need to do everything by roll call, including opening the meeting and closing the meeting. Everything has to be done by roll call. If there's any kind of formal action, it's all by roll call the minute there's one person participating remotely. The state requires a quorum present in the room. And then they don't have any restriction on how many additional members could participate remotely. There doesn't seem to be anything in the state regs that controls that. The town, on top of that, issued its own set of regulations or they have a policy issued by the select board because they're the authority who controls how all committees within the community operate. And we have the ability as an individual committee to adopt the policy or not adopt the policy. If we don't adopt it, then we aren't allowed to use remote participation because the town has its own written policy. The finance committee has adopted that policy. So before COVID, our controls are that it is supposed to be used rarely, all caps. It is supposed to be only one person, maximum one person in the policy may participate remotely. And there are controls on how, what the difficulties that you are encountering are. There's a 4-part test. Are you in military service? You can read them, and they're in the list that I printed. That if you have one of these states of affairs that are causing you not to be able to, and one of them is extreme geographic impossibility of attending. I don't know if Boston qualifies for that, but you know, it's in there.
Depends
So
on traffic.
So the town constrained what the state did with a little bit more detail. And they also said that you need to tell the chair 48 hours in advance. So that, you know, that reasonable, you know, as reasonable as possible, you know, please get back to the chair and ask for permission. That the state had a bit of a loose definition of what that was. The town was a little bit more crisp, must be at least 48 hours. So those are the policies that are in place before the governor issued a state of emergency. And if the state of emergency is lifted, or he terminates the executive order, even without lifting his state of emergency, he could just terminate the executive order. We would fall back to that position. Now, the town could relax its policy up to the level that the state allows and say, well, our constraints to just one person could be lifted and we could have like just under a quorum. So for our group, it could be 7 of us could, you know, be remote, but 8 of us have to be present. So we're not going to get to full Zoom meetings. Really, that's not likely to happen because the state would have to make changes in its regular policy for a full Zoom meeting to be allowed. So we have to wait for the state if anything's going to happen that's really robust, like we're having a meeting right now. That's not happening. But under the current policy, the executive order was issued to say all participants can participate remotely, and they do not need the chair's permission to do it. And they specifically, you know, extinguished one of the clauses 4B that requires that stuff. So that's where we are, and the town and the select board has set aside our policy. I couldn't find, and I don't know where to look for the explicit action that the select board took to set our policy aside, but we're all operating under the assumption that that's been set aside and we're going to operate under Zoom. So it to me, and this is just me having read all this stuff now, and by the way, these regulations have a lot more in them. They have to do with what authorities and who can issue policies at the municipal level and what they control and blah. There's a lot in there that is not relevant to the conversation that we're having, frankly. And what alternative means are, there's just a lot there that doesn't have much to do with us wanting to just meet and have people use these tools. To me, if we were to get out of the COVID world and say, we want to allow some of our members to join remotely, I think we would pretty much fall back to conference calls. The Zoom, we're not really set up, unless we can technologically overcome it, to have a Zoom call married to a quorum in the room. It seems like that's a bit of a stretch. We do have a lot of technology in the select board room. We absolutely do. But all the rest of the committees in town, which meet in a lot of different spaces, do not have that level of technology available to them in their rooms. So it is likely that folks would be literally using conference phones. So the town could expand its policy, and that policy could allow more than one member to join, and they could relax the 5-part test of the stressful situation that you're overcoming to be more nebulous, sort of along the lines of what the state has. Let me just go to refer to my text and see what the state's actual words are here. It has to be unreasonably difficult to participate in person, according to the state standard, and unreasonably difficult. So, the town could fall back to that level of, and people can kind of hand wave that perhaps. Oh, it's unreasonably difficult for you to get back for a 6 o'clock meeting from your office, so just join from there. It's unreasonably difficult. So, we could make some hay, but it's not going to be a panacea, is my view of it at this point. So I'm open to conversation.
Any questions, Parashar?
Dean, thank you for the research. It seems, correct me if I'm wrong, that reasonable, if we want more flexibility for our members, to ask the select board to use the state standard, make sure at a minimum we can access a conference phone or line that
Yep.
people can dial into. The folks in the room can dial into the speakerphone and do old-fashioned conference line, and would permit flexibility for those folks that have to run back from Boston or wherever, avoid missing meetings, et cetera, and over the long run, increase the number of volunteers, not just for us, but for other committees as well. And I'm wondering if we should think about asking the select board to change the policy for the town.
Lois.
I agree, and I actually think there is some interest in doing that. Obviously, the state regulations set the floor.
Right.
But the reality is right now that the town's regulation, the town policy is not just more specific, it's also more restrictive.
Right.
Yes.
So there's room for creating a little more flexibility while staying very clearly within the bounds of the laws themselves. And I know there's guidance from the state attorney general's office on how the state regs should be interpreted, which would be helpful in crafting the policy. It's also not, it's not an immediate issue that we need to be focusing on when we have a lot of other priorities, because realistically, that state of emergency isn't going anywhere for a while. And we are probably going to be, meeting in this way through the entire guidelines process. I mean, it's more likely than not. And our ability to meet in a different way is going to be dependent on the select board adopting a different policy. And I'm not sure whether or not that would have to be done at town meeting, or can the select board do that without having to go to town meeting?
Yeah, I believe according to the state regulation that the select board they have full authority to set a policy that guides all the committees over which they have authority. So
Well,
I don't think that they need to go to a higher legislative kind of practice to get it done. I think they have the authority to do it based on my reading of the law.
Well, I'm willing. I have experience in drafting policies for corporations, for nonprofits. And I practiced law for a lot of years. I'd be willing to take on, as a separate assignment, starting to tinker with the language and do some research, talk to Carmen, come back to the committee with some suggestions about some specific changes that we as a committee might bring to the select board. But, and we can decide the timing of that, because again, we're going to be meeting this way for the next couple of months at least.
Right.
So it's not something that has to be done on a schedule that interferes with our other responsibilities.
I have a question though. Say we were successful in getting the select board to relax the town's policy to be more in line with the state's policy. Do we have any technology constraints within our own technology infrastructure that would make that?
That's got to be researched. I mean, and one of the things we shouldn't be doing is proposing something that puts an undue burden on the town or creates additional.
Stephen, do you know? Stephen, do you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think, sorry, I don't know if Kathy wants to go first because she's on the committee.
Kathy, go ahead.
I just have a question. I apologize being new here. You're talking about changing the meeting time from 7 to something earlier. And because of that, the committee feels that they need to allow people to not be present. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Well, I think that's one of the factors. It also will create a little more flexibility in other circumstances.
Well,
but it's
again,
not.
Again, Lois, I'm thinking that what I've heard coming into this committee is that the committee has historically met in person at 7 o'clock.
Yep.
And that gives people time to get home and or people to have dinner with their families. So I know people are doing a lot of work, doing a lot of research, and I'm just trying to make sure that I understand what is our goal.
Yep.
And if our goal is just to I don't want to say just to start earlier, is to start earlier, then we need to think about that, obviously. But we should also be thinking about what is the most effective way to meet. I've been thinking a lot about this with my own business because we have so many people working remotely, and people love working remotely, but we've all acknowledged that nothing replaces being live and in person. So again, don't mean to interrupt.
No, that's fine. That's fine. No, I appreciate everything. That was great. Thank you, Kathy. I think you're right. We started the discussion about should we move the time, and then we kind of went off on a tangent a little bit about how, yes, maybe we can move the time, but maybe we can also make remote participation a reality as well. So that's how we got to where we are right now.
Before Stephen goes, Kathy, one other thing, in my previous job and even in my current job, I travel a lot. And so if I'm out of state, I can end up missing a whole bunch of meetings. But if I can dial in, for example, and I'm sure there are others in the same boat, we would be able to participate and, hopefully add more value to the committee. And also, frankly, as I said, for other town committees, et cetera, maybe it might increase the number of people that might even want to volunteer if we make it easier for people to participate by telephone. Not routinely, because I agree with you on the value of the in-person meeting, but when necessary.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. Again, I also travel a lot in my business, and I just want to confess that I know that I'm probably more effective, the most effective in person, next effective on Zoom, and not as effective by phone.
Point taken. Lois.
Well, and I think, Kathy, the state legislature agrees with you, because one of the constraints we would be operating under in encouraging the select board to adopt a policy that was more directly in line with the state one of the premises we'd have to accept is that the state law encourages in-person participation. So that's still the goal. So you're still talking about creating an occasional exceptions rather than a regular pattern of working remotely, except in an emergency situation like we're in now. So this is just to I don't think it would help us necessarily moving the time of the meeting an hour if it meant that the same three people always needed an exception. We'd have to look at the specifics of whatever policy we were all comfortable with and what the select board would adopt. But the thrust of it is still to encourage in-person participation. It's just to create a little more flexibility for those circumstances when a member has another competing commitment. And I think it is an important point that there are a lot of people in town who would feel more able to participate if they knew that they would have the option of calling in from a hotel room if they were away on a business trip, even though they might, when it's within their power, try and schedule their trips to not be away on the nights the finance committee is meeting.
Thank you. Andrea.
I think we're talking about two different things.
Mm-hmm.
We should probably separate them. Earlier times versus how we meet.
Remote.
Right, yeah, exactly.
The earlier times depends on when. A lot of people don't want to stay at work. I mean, this is not my problem here, but a lot of people are working somewhere else and they don't want to stay there. They want to come home. So the later time is better. If you have it right in the middle, an hour earlier, you're in the middle of if you've got a family, young family, you're in the middle of that. Dinner time, if we start late, sometimes we run late. So I think it's a separate issue that we need to, that's what we really need to decide, I think.
I think what
And then-
happened was is we started talking about starting earlier, and people said that they might be agreeable to starting earlier if they were able to participate remotely. And then we got into the remote, at least that's how I remember it.
Exactly how it happened.
And that's how, so now we're starting to talk about remote participation as maybe one way to make it people more likely to agree to an earlier meeting. So I think the first step, if we can sequence this, would be to explore remote participation. And I still need Stephen's answer to the question, is can we do this technologically? So Dee, before I get that, Stephen, can you answer that question for us, please, before I forget?
So could I just touch on a couple of things, Mary?
Yeah, go ahead.
The first is I wrote I prepared the policy for the meeting meeting policy that is in effect now that we're all meeting under with Zoom. So I presented it to the board. I don't recall if they voted to endorse it, but I prepared that. That is on the website. I think it's a good discussion. I just think you're about 6 months too soon, because until there's a widely deployed vaccine, I don't know when the governor plans on lifting his state of emergency, but we also have a local state of emergency that we are operating under. And I don't know if anyone would feel safe, especially with Concord, statistically speaking, having an older population, really unlocking a lot of in-person things. Technologically, I think we have advanced our capabilities for hosting Zoom meetings and allowing any board and committee that wants to meet remotely. We've even started to train chairs of committees to manage their own Zoom meetings, so so staff isn't required, especially town manager's office staff isn't required to manage each one. There are certain ones that we do that because they need to be right. I mean, all committees need to be right, but some of them aren't broadcast live. Some of them are just recorded, so we have some opportunity. But I think the thing is, and in one last anecdote, the select board, as you know, moved the meetings to 4 o'clock. That has worked out great. I will tell you that I look at the participants during our meetings, and I think we get better participation via Zoom at 4 o'clock than we ever did at 7 o'clock in the brief time I was here. You all met in that select board meeting room. It's nice when you can get like 2 or 3 times the number of people that could fit comfortably in that room present for a discussion of community concern. And that's what this does for us, because people can take 5 minutes, Zoom in from, their kitchen or their hotel room or their, by their pool or whatever, and be a part of the discussion for things that are of interest to them versus going down to the townhouse. So I think that this is an issue that 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts are going to be thinking about as this pandemic, hopefully soon, comes to an end. And I can't imagine a scenario under which the legislature and governor don't modify the laws to allow more of this to happen, because I think people are going to want to have the opportunity. They may choose to go back to in-person meetings the old-fashioned way, but they're going to, I think, want to have the opportunity to do this as an option as well. So I just don't think that decision is going to be made in 2020.
Thank you, Stephen. Dee.
So Stephen, just to follow
Dean,
on from that point, I think the question that's more relevant than whether or not we're successfully running Zoom the way we are is, can we run some kind of hybrid where we actually have people sitting in a room and then we have a subset who are on Zoom, and that somehow MMN can figure out how to marry all that together and still have something that goes out to the person who's watching it on a TV or it's recorded. So the technological real problem is when we get to the hybrid mode, when we're back to normal-ish life and people are in-person meetings are are valid again. And people are showing up at the townhouse to sit in a meeting room, but some of them want to participate. And let's say we all realize how this is workable, that could be expanded. And now we have to figure out how to marry all of that together into some kind of archived thing that is, or even to make it functional in real time, is the technological challenge that we would face, as opposed to just having people on a speakerphone. So it's not a trivial problem, and I'm sure that it can be solved.
I think the short answer is yes, we can, but it'll be, like I said, January or February at the very earliest that we do.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Just
Early.
because of the townhouse
Dee.
renovations, townhouse is
Okay.
closed, so.
Dee, Dee, it's your turn. I'm sorry. Thank you for being patient.
The only thing I wanted to mention, and it's kind of, Stephen almost got there, which is, this is really a matter of how you define in-person participation. I feel as though I'm in person. Everybody I see on the screen, unless they, dim themselves, mute themselves, or video off, we're all here. I don't think we could be any more in participation or in-person participation unless we were in a room, but that's the old technology. And so it just seems to me that the focus should be on how we define in-person participation.
I'm going to take two
And
more.
that's probably a state issue because that's part of the state policy, but that's where I'd focus.
Greg, do you want to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, I make a motion that Lois writes a letter to the select board recommending they take a look at this policy and up-level this a little bit and move on.
Yeah,
'cause I think we're talking of details right now that are
Yeah.
8 months,
I
10
agree.
months out.
I totally agree.
I agree.
Unless you guys want to stay till 10 o'clock and Peter can't
Yep.
have his cheers until that time, we can stay.
Thank you. I agree.
Are drinks on you if we stay till 10, Greg?
What's that?
Are drinks on you if we stay till 10?
Sure, come on over.
Then Greg, make a motion.
Yeah, I make a motion that Lois just writes a note on behalf of the FinCom that says to the select board to review the policy going forward and make a recommendation to change it to match the state.
I think we're way ahead of ourselves. I think we should table this for a while and then come back to it. I think even asking the select board to think about this now. Okay, so I'm sorry. Do I have a second for Greg's? Is there a second for Greg's motion? Peter, okay. Discussion, I think we're ahead of ourselves. I'm sorry I brought this up last time. No good deed goes unpunished. So I would vote against this, and I would say table this for a few more months until we see what's happening.
I would be happy to write the letter, but I actually think instead of going to that conclusion, I think I agree with Mary. Let's table it. Let's do a little more research, maybe have a conversation. I have reason to believe that the town manager would actually be happy to see some thought given to this policy. But we can do a little more research, a little more thinking. And then if we do as a committee at some point decide to go to the select board, we'd be a lot more specific in saying, this is what we would like to see done. And maybe even proposing a little bit of language. And again, I think the point's been made repeatedly. We're going to be in the state of emergency for a while. And so these exceptions will apply. We don't have to move on this immediately. If we move to the second point after this motion and talk about moving the time earlier, that we could move the time earlier and keep doing this on Zoom. That's the way we're going to be meeting. So we could temporarily change the time of the meeting if we wanted to do that and keep meeting on Zoom. So I can see deferring this and giving us a little more time to let it get more thought through.
Thank you. Any more discussion?
Mary, can I just make one suggestion? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So I do feel compelled to make the comment that drafting a policy for conducting of meetings is not the Finance Committee's role. But I do think that the Finance Committee's input as a committee and how you conduct yourselves is feedback the select board is going to want to do, but not giving the select board advice on how to adopt a town-wide policy for all boards and committees. So I think and I hear all of you, and I think the same conversations happening here is going to happen in every board and committee at some point in time over the next 6 months. And so because this is a shared issue, my suggestion would be that the chair perhaps approach the chair of the select board and see if this can be a future chair's breakfast discussion. Because I do believe that's the place for this to happen, because it's not just a policy for the finance committee, it's going to be a policy for all boards and committees. So that's my suggestion.
Yeah, I
Thank
think
you.
very well taken point.
Thank you. Okay, I need a vote on the motion on the table.
Well, couldn't Greg just withdraw his motion and we could move
And I
on?
withdraw, yeah, I will,
Yeah.
I will
Okay.
withdraw it. It was just for the, exactly what Stephen just said, to get it so that they're aware of it and to put it on the, to get it out in front of everybody. So I will rescind.
Great.
Hey, Stephen, the next time, can you just lead with that? Thanks.
Cheers.
All right.
Okay, moving right along. What time is it? 8:26. Not too bad. Okay, chair's report.
Just a comment.
Yeah.
I'm with Dee. I love Zoom. And I
You like Zoom?
anytime you want.
Okay.
We'll meet on
Thank
Zoom.
you. Okay.
Thanks, Andrea.
I've noted many times that for the first 300 years of Concord's history, we didn't do any business online, and now we do it every day. And that switch happened in about a week.
Yeah.
And so I do think this is a new normal that I do think, I know in talking to the members of the select board, they think it, not only is it more convenient, I think everybody accepts that it's more convenient, but there are also, I do think, bona fide participation benefits to doing it. So there's my stump speech.
Okay. I really enjoy being in the townhouse. I really loved going to the townhouse. It was a special feeling to just walk in there. I loved that. I missed that. Okay, I'm moving along in the agenda. We're going to the chair's comments. I'll be brief. Because we now have a reprieve on the guideline process, I think we can take advantage of the next few months and the next few meetings to kind of do a little bit of grounding, a little bit of training. I mentioned earlier when Elise was here that the debt subcommittee met once, and what we decided in our first meeting is that we all need to get grounded on what are the different types of debt, what are the terms we use, what are the policies out there, because we need to get just a better understanding. So that would be a great way for us to all kind of get a little tutorial on debt, because it's a big part of our budget. So that's one thing we can do at one of our subsequent meetings before the guideline process kicks off. The other thing I'm hoping to do, and I'm working with the school committee, is to also put together some training on more specifics, technical specifics about the school budget. 7 of us went to the Mass School Committee training on school finances, and that was very good. It was some technical information. It was a lot of policy information, which I was unaware of, so that was very helpful. But I would like to get more training at the very specific level about Concord Carlisle, and I've put out several signals to the school committee and hope that that becomes a reality. So I'm hoping to take the next few months to give us an opportunity to get a little bit of grounding. I can use it. I've been on the committee 4 years, and I'm sure the new people can use it. So those are my remarks as far as what I'm hoping to accomplish the next few meetings, besides our regular business. Observer reports. I'm going to go around and ask if anybody has gone to any meetings. It hasn't been a long time since our last one, but maybe there has been some. So I'll start with you, Dee. Do you have anything to report for Observer?
I do. I have 3 topics actually tonight. The first one involves the school committee's budget subcommittee. And I'm just going to be reading my notes, so if you don't see my face, that's probably better. At our September 24th meeting, Dean Banfield asked about the status of the school committee's budget subcommittee. The next day, I emailed both the CPS chair, Court Booth, and the regional chair, Sarah Williams, regarding this matter, noting that no meeting minutes had been recorded or posted since the November 14th, 2018 date. I discussed this matter with Court Booth on the following Monday and received an email from both chairs on Tuesday, September 29th. In their reply, 2 objectives were detailed. The first one, oversight of current budgetary activity, and the second one is the preparation of next year's proposal. With regards to the current budget, Jared Stanton, Director of Finance and Operations, presents to the school committees monthly the 1,000 level reports that show functional operational areas. I think everybody knows what if you don't know what the 1,000 level reports are, you can find that on the school's website under budget reports. And the 1,000 level, which align with the DESI method of coding expenses. On a quarterly basis, the 100 level accounts are reviewed in detail. The second point, regarding the preparation of needs analysis and budget proposal for the upcoming year. So we're talking FY22. The school committees follow the practice used in the preceding year. The 2 chairs meet with the superintendent and the director of finance and operations on a relatively frequent basis to informally share ideas during the superintendent's process of developing her proposals. Budget deliberations are then shared in public sessions with all school committee members so that all members are equally informed, as this is a collective responsibility of both school committees. Now, I do have an email from Court that I could submit as part of our correspondence if you want that in the minutes.
No.
Otherwise, excuse me?
No.
Well, you can decide that in a minute. The second point, the second topic is the school committee meeting of September 29th. And all I'm going to do is highlight the portions of the meeting that impact finance.
That's good.
During the discussion on correspondence, the chair made reference to the finance committee email by stating that the school committees have no intention of having a budget committee, as the budget and expenses are the responsibility of all members on either committee. So that was his public acknowledgement of our discussion and his email to me.
Okay.
Second point, Chair Booth also asked for professional development in the context of the budget. If you recall in the presentation made by Jared Stanton, the CPS shows $0 in professional development for all CPS schools. And the superintendent's response to his question was that the costs in the professional development line of the budget are for the individual's personal development only. And that the Wednesday afternoon's professional development sessions come out of, I think her name is Christine Hubert, but I could not find her on the listing, out of her budgets. So in that regard, I don't know where the budgets fall. I've looked at the 100 level reports, the accounts that they have, and I don't know where the dollar amount would be in that. So I guess there's not a disconnect, having a 0 in the professional development line for the elementary schools, having a 0, a number there, because apparently no one is going to be receiving personal development. But there is development going on in Wednesday afternoons, which is for the teachers. And I'll leave it at that. He asked the question and that was the response, and there was no follow-up by anybody else at the school committee meeting. The last point in that meeting was that the CPS school committee voted to approve a 1-year contract for the Concord Teachers Association with a salary increase of 1.75%.
And that goes through the end of June, right?
Through that, yes. And then all the contracts will be on the same schedule going forward after that.
So it does not cover their FY22 contracts.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Good.
And then the other report was for the joint school committee meeting of October 6th. Okay. In response to a query made by our finance chair, Mary Hartman, the CPS chair, Court Booth, reviewed the two-step process currently in place for the review and signing of all warrants. Now, I know that this came directly out of the educational program that we attended, right? Okay, so the two-step process includes, does everybody know what a warrant means in the school committee jargon? It's for if they purchase something, there's a warrant. And so all of the purchases, if I'm understanding this correctly, all of the purchases come through and then the school committee is supposed to look at them because they have to authorize the and appropriate the funds essentially. So the first step in the process is every individual receipt review or individual receipt review and a query, if necessary, of every warrant by every member of the appropriate school committee. That's step one. So everybody on, say, CPS receives a copy of what the warrant is, or multiple warrants if they have a stack of them. And then they can comment on it. They can make, phone calls to get clarification, etc. And the second part of it is that somebody has to sign it. So what they have developed by the school committee, and this also goes with the region, is that they have 4 people who are authorized to sign. And 3 of them come from Concord and 1 is a Carlisle person. So that is the second phase. And so that after everybody has a chance, every member has a chance to look and review at every warrant, then they come and somebody is authorized to sign for that. And it's one of those 4 people. It's just not anybody on the committee. It's 4 people who are designated as appropriate to sign or as approved to sign. The second point, now this goes to something that Chris said earlier. Under correspondence, it was noted that the finance guidelines chair, our finance guidelines chair, had indicated that separate meetings for discussion on the budgets of the 2 committees would be scheduled. So that is during the hearing phase. Is that correct? Okay, not at the beginning phase.
It's not the hearings, it's the finance committee meetings.
The second time, right?
Yes.
That was not delineated or described in detail when that comment was made.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third part, and this is the last piece, there was a vote taken to approve a 1-year secretary's contract, noting that there also was a 1.75 salary increase included. And that is the 1 year. So then that contract also, the secretary's contract will also be on the same time frame with all the others going forward after FY 21.
Right. And Dee, when you say 1.75, it's the COLA, right?
The secretaries.
Yes.
The secretary's COLA and the other contract, it was the teacher's COLA was agreed at, the cost of living adjustment, right?
They just said 1.75, but I guess we
It is
have to.
COLA.
I think it's the COLA, right?
It is
Yeah.
COLA, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and then the only other thing I wanted to mention that, no, I won't, because this was about the training that we attended. And I had a couple of questions that I wasn't sure we had sufficient information on. I will bring up one, which was, and it was Dean Banfield. Maybe Dean, you would like to mention this yourself. Dean had posed a question during this educational program. Did you want to mention it?
Sure. There are a couple of procedural items that just don't seem to be followed by our school committee during its budgeting process that sort of struck a chord with me during the training. The person who was doing the presentation of the training said that a school committee should approve its budget, and it should not approve its budget with a single line item vote for, $38 million. Yeah, that's our budget. They should approve a budget much like the way the town budget is presented at town meeting, with sections of budgetary authority, and each of those sections of budgetary authority need to be separately spelled out and approved. And the person doing the presentation recommended multiple votes, one for HR and personnel, maybe one for transportation. And there could be multiple lines within personnel, or there could be, several things going on in transportation. But, some set of budget buckets should be separately approved. And then if, just like with at the end of the year with us, if there's a bucket that's an overrun bucket and it needs to have a transferred in from somewhere else because that one was underrun, that's a school committee responsibility and authority to execute that transfer. Because our budget process is a single line, that becomes an administrative function, because all transfers can just occur underneath the aegis of the one number that you have. So the person doing the presentation strongly recommended against the process that we appear to use, I believe.
I have to interrupt you here, okay? I think a lot of what we're talking about is really school committee decisions, not finance committee decisions. So we can ask the questions, but it really is up to them to decide how they want to put forward their articles at town meeting. And we can raise questions, okay? And we can have opinions. And I think we've given them some of our opinions, but it really is their decision. So I'm going to stop stop this conversation now.
Yep.
Okay.
That's fine.
Because it really is. I mean, and I think we've sent out signals that we learned something at this workshop that said that there are some things that the school committee could be doing to have better financial oversight. We've sent those signals out, and now it's up to the school committee, I think, to pick up that ball.
Okay, fair enough. I think you sent the other letter about warrants. Like, warrants are never on the warrant. I mean, they're never on the agenda. So
it was a conversation. It's really, I'm sending out signals saying, hey, we heard this, talk about this, or, so my goal, I'll say it just bluntly, my goal is to get the school committee more involved in the finances of the schools. That's my goal. And that's why so all the questions we asked at the workshop, I think did that, and conversations I've had do that, and I've had email correspondences back and forth, but the goal is to really get the school committee, because I think it's under new leadership now, and that's what I'm hoping. Are you done, Dee?
I am.
Parashar?
I have nothing. Elise gave the update.
Thank you. Lois?
I haven't gotten an assignment yet.
Okay.
Of,
Didn't I send you the observer assignments?
no, I don't think so. Or if you did, I missed them, Mary. I'm sorry.
I'll resend them.
Thank you.
I will. I'll resend them. I have to make myself a note. Okay, Dean.
I have two that did not meet. The school building committee for the middle school has not met, has not restarted yet. And the Climate Action Advisory Board has not had another meeting since the last meeting that they had. However, I did attend the Concord Business Partnership breakfast, which is, I think, a monthly affair. And, I gave a few comments from the perspective of the Finance Committee. The main concern with the business community is really the stress that that COVID has placed on the community, and the amount of low capacity that they're going to have in their stores through the holiday season. So just for all of us to be aware, the business community is trying to elongate the holiday shopping season. Stephen, I know he's probably still on the call here, has authorized that right after Halloween, we're going to put up holiday type stuff on the lampposts and that sort of thing to try, because the stores are constrained to 50% of their normal fire code capacity number of people inside the stores. So that just means they can have fewer transactions over their crush period, and they're trying to elongate the season. And that's the main thing. The big problem for businesses is that there's a huge hole that was created in their annual income that was created by COVID foot traffic is coming back. Tourism seems to be really robust right now, even though buses are coming in with only 50% the capacity of a leaf peeper bus, for example. So there's the rub. It's just hard for them to get the same volume of traffic and transactions through their establishments as they had previously been able to do. And the town's doing what it can to sort of encourage transactions in business. So there you go. Concord Business Partnership.
Thanks, Steve. Andrea, do you have anything you want to say?
Economic Vitality Committee
Yeah.
met. I think there's some overlap with what Dean said, what Dean just reported.
Yep.
And the difficulty is, one of the difficulties is that the business owner, retail especially, but all business owners are inundated with emails, suggestions, join this, do that, fill out this form for this grant. And they're having difficulty. We are having difficulty doing all of that. The response, there was a block grant for the town from the state, up to $10,000. At the time of the last meeting, there had been one applicant. What I found out in looking at the application is there was a restriction on income level, personal income level, and it was really geared, although Concord was one of the towns that got this lump sum of money, it was really for more low and moderate income business owners. So that eliminated many people who started to apply.
Yep.
There's the $2,500 Concord Together grant. Most people, I think, that applied for it got $2,500. Not going to go that far, and there really isn't anything else on the horizon for help. Suggestion was that maybe landlords, some of the landlords are really bending over backwards to try all kinds of innovative ways to help their commercial tenants. One suggestion was there are open windows, display windows, empty stores, and if the landlords would allow some of the other businesses to put up a display in the empty spots, that would help walk-by traffic to advertise what people are selling. The earlier start isn't, from what I can gather and my own experience, to the holiday season isn't just to get people thinking about Christmas. It's also the consideration that a lot of people don't realize is the supply chain across wherever you're ordering things. It's not just coming in the store and buying it. Getting merchandise in from around the country, from manufacturers, we just never know when you pick up the phone to try and order something what you're going to get. If you're going to even get anything this year. And so there are a number of things in the works. Suggestions, special sales. I don't know what'll work. There was also John Boynton, who's the chair, said that he had been, he's also one of the landlords, he had been tossing around an idea, thinking about it for the last few years, and decided to reveal it. And this may concern the Finance Committee eventually, starting a trust similar to the Land Conservation Trust, where Concord citizens would invest in the trust as commercial buildings come up for sale.
Yeah, that was, it was a REIT. It was a real estate investment trust. So that would be private investing. And so I don't think there would be any public money.
Well, it's yes, but it's still being worked on.
Yeah,
I don't know what they're going to come up with.
I'm pretty sure, Andrea, that it would not require any taxpayer, any town money. It would be all private investors.
Yeah, well, I did hear that, but I also heard a mention of talking to the town manager and possibly the town's budget.
Okay.
There was a passing mention of that. So I don't know where that.
Then we would be interested.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where it's going to go.
Okay.
But the idea was that the return for your investment would actually be very low, maybe, 2%. But what would happen is the buildings would stay under local control and the rents would be kept low enough so that individuals, mom and pop businesses can afford to open a business in town instead of having huge real estate corporations, international corporations buying commercial real estate.
Right.
And the rents, because they paid a lot of money for it, the rents are very high.
Right.
And that's and they've changed their meeting day from Wednesday to Tuesday at 4:00.
Thank you. Chris?
No, CPC meets next week, so I have nothing.
Great, thank you. Wade?
I have nothing to report. There's no meeting on the agenda now for the Housing Development Corporation.
Okay, thanks, Wade. Greg?
Concord Light meets next week, and I missed the Board of Health one.
Okay. I'm really interested, Greg, to see if Concord Light is doing anything about all of these sustainability ideas. So that would be something to keep your ears open for. Kathy, have you been able to make contact with any of those committees?
Yes, I've been in contact with both the Retirement Planning Board and the Assessors Board, Board of Assessors. The Board of Assessors is meeting in 2 weeks, and the Retirement Planning Board, I think, is in a similar time frame. I'm on both of their calendars.
Great.
Nothing else.
Great, thank you. John?
Hi, yeah, so the Tax Relief Committee canceled their meeting, nothing to report there. I did manage to attend the Financial Audit Advisory Committee. We'll all be very relieved to know that the auditor had no problem with the fiscal year 2019, June 2019 results, which seems like an awfully long time ago. So, there are a lot of interesting topics like OPEB and pension liability and things discussed, but given the time frame, i.e. ancient history, I don't think it's really that pertinent for this committee tonight, unless this was my first meeting with this company, unless Carrie would like to point out something dramatic from her perspective. It seemed like it was helpful for me to understand the process and the schedule and the charge of the committee going forward, but not particularly relevant given the topic at the meeting.
Thank you, John. Brian, do you have anything that you want to tell us about library?
Nothing, they haven't met yet this
Okay,
month.
great.
They haven't
Phil?
met yet this month, so nothing to report.
Okay, thank you. Phil?
Public Works Commission meets next week, so I have nothing to report.
Okay. And Peter, do you want any last words? Okay.
I'm a short timer, so no committee reports.
Okay.
No, I'm good. I bid you all a fond farewell and keep up the great work, everybody. Appreciate all your hard work.
Thanks, Peter. I have a few things to say about the select board meetings that I've been attending. The first thing is the townhouse renovations. You know, the townhouse is closed, and after the election, there's going to be some renovations of the ground floor. I think it's going to take about 6 months for that to be completed. The thing that I want to mention is that the town went out of its way to save us money. First of all, because they used a lot of help that we already had on the payroll to do a lot of the moving. And secondly, that they found ways to move into space we already owned, and they didn't have to rent out any external office space. So they're doing it as economically as they can. This is money that we appropriated years ago. I think we raised the money a while ago. So I think it will be beautiful once it's done in about 6 months when we can go back in. That's good timing. The other thing is that Terry Ackerman attend some kind of a Massachusetts Municipal Association meeting, and they talked about the state budget. Carrie, you could probably tell us more about that. And there was a really good article in the Globe. I don't know if anybody saw it, about what the state budget, they haven't even gotten their FY21 budget yet, but they're looking at a big shortfall in this year's budget, and then the next year's budget shortfall is the estimate is anywhere from, I read, from 1.3 billion up to 3.5 billion. So it's anybody's guess what it can be. But the state has a problem. I mean, this year they're level funding locally, but they're going to have a problem, and they only have 3 levers available to them. It's either to reduce spending, use their reserves, and I think they have a $3.5 billion rainy day fund, or raise taxes. And so far, the Baker administration has said they're not going to raise taxes. They do raise fees, but so far they're not raising taxes. So when we're looking at our FY22 guideline, these are things we're going to have to keep in mind as far as trying to come up with an estimate for state aid. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Carrie, and I'm sure you can add more to that and give us your report.
Really, the one thing that I wanted to mention to you this evening is we have finally finished calculating all of the new growth for fiscal 21, and the assessor has sent that into the Department of Revenue for certification. And the good news is that our new growth is about $67,000 higher than what we had originally estimated. We started at something over $1 million, we reduced it down to 900, and we sent in 967,000 to be certified. So that means that the increase in property tax will be a little bit less than what we expected. Right now, we're thinking it will come below 2.5% to the existing property owner. And we actually, when we put the first and second quarter bills together, we had already assumed a 2.5% increase. So hopefully most people, assuming your valuation remains about the same as it was last year, you won't see an increase in your third and fourth quarter tax bills. So I think people will appreciate that. I don't know what to say about the fiscal 22 budget. We do know that what we're getting from the state in 21, and I think we've all said all along that we're definitely concerned about fiscal 22. And it's just until the state passes a 21 budget, they're not really going to start talking about 22. So we certainly appreciate the additional time in being able to, that we have before we have to come through the guidelines process. Our local revenues in fiscal 21 through the first quarter are as strong as they've ever been. Our property tax collection is right at almost 100%, which is surprising. The meals tax and the hotel motel tax were low. We did just get those in earlier this week for June, July, and August.
Mm-hmm.
We're low, but they're tracking with our lower estimate, so we don't have any concerns yet. I had mentioned to you before about some of our fixed costs. We're going into 22 in a really good position in terms of our fixed. We know what our OPEB assessment is, and it's not significantly higher than this year. Our retirement assessment is actually level funded because we smooth our gains and losses over a period of 3 years. So we're still smoothing some some pretty significant gains. So we have a $0 increase in the assessment, and the only increase will be the additional amount that is owed as a result of the change in the COLA that was approved by town meeting. So you might recall that's about $300,000 or so. So we'll have a low overall increase in the assessment. And our health insurance, we expect good things out of our health insurance renewal in fiscal 22. We are part of a 17-member town consortium for health insurance that is self-funded. I've been with the town for 4 years. We try to have about $5 to $6 million in reserves. We've been as low as about 2.5%, and now we're pushing, not 2.5%, 2.5 million. Now we're pushing about $12 million. So we're looking at some premium holidays. Maybe we'll have a 1-month premium holiday, but I think more important, I'm expecting a very low increase going into fiscal 22. So that's going to help us quite a lot too. And with the employees who will be receiving an increase much lower than what they've typically seen, we are definitely going to be talking about the low renewal we had going into 21 and the expectation that it will be low going into 22. So, but again, the state, thankfully, we don't receive a lot of money from the state because the state budget is going to be very tough in fiscal 22.
Great. And these are all things we'll sort out when we do our guidelines in January and February.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
great. Good.
Carrie, can I ask Carrie a quick question, Mary?
Sure.
Are you concerned that Moody's or the credit agencies might alter the outlook or the credit rating of the state, of the Commonwealth?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with the process. They might, the first step is a negative outlook. I think I would be surprised if they would even be at that point. I mean, we don't know yet how they're going to level fund state aid in fiscal 21. We have to assume it's coming from the stabilization fund. And, but I don't think that would happen. And I'm not sure that that would have it certainly wouldn't have a direct impact on the town.
While we're on that subject, Carrie, next time we meet, can we have an update on free cash after all of the articles that we approved? When will you have certified free cash as of June 30th of this year?
Well, we are hoping that we will be submitting that to the state at the end of this month.
Okay.
So because, because town meeting was late, we are definitely behind where we typically would be. But John, maybe you heard it at the audit committee meeting on Tuesday morning. I think we promised to deliver that by the end of this month. So that we would then have a certification. It doesn't take the state too much time to turn that around.
So when are you thinking, November?
If we do get it in by the end of the month, for sure, before Thanksgiving.
Okay, yeah. I'd just like to take a look at it because we spent a lot of it last town meeting, or we appropriated a lot of it at our last town meeting. So I think the last time you gave us a forecast, we were going to go down to about 8 million and some change.
Yeah, and I assume that's going to hold because we expect that we close the year really with no gain, but no loss. Because
Because of, right? That's $750,000, right? Okay, so we'll talk about that then once it's certified. Okay, is there anything else anybody wants to talk about? I don't see anybody else on our call as far as citizen comments. Oh, no, I do. Sorry, I do. Do we have any citizen comments? If we do, now's your opportunity to raise your hand. No? Okay. Anybody have any other comments? Okay, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Wait, I need to do a roll because we're remote. So I'm going to go around. Dee?
Yes.
Yes. Myself, Mary, yes. Parashar?
Yes.
Lois? Dean?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
Wade?
Yes.
Brian?
No, we still have to have Peter's party. Fine.
I know. We can't even
Let's
hug him.
go.
Yes,
Hug
yes,
Peter,
I'm ready to
geez.
go.
Greg?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
John?
And by the way, I have Chris Reynolds on the speakerphone.
Oh, what happened to Chris?
Chris, yes. Go ahead, Chris.
She votes yes. I heard that. She votes yes.
Dean, what's the calling through somebody else to get into the
I don't
meeting?
know
Is
about that.
She lost her internet.
Oh, wow.
I saw somebody drop off the thing and I was trying to figure out who it was.
Lost her internet and I live 2 blocks away, so she was checking with me and I said, well, I'll dial you in so you can hear it. So
Great.
she heard the treasurer's report.
John?
Yes.
Phil?
Yes.
And Peter?
Yes, for the last time.
Bye,
Peace
Peter.
out.
Thank you,
Bye, Peter,
Peter.
and thank you.
Bye, guys.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.
Night.
Bye. Thank you, Kathy. You're welcome. Good night, Chris.